I would like all of you to focus a little bit more on the policy address and give us more comments on it. The lady in a yellow blouse. Good afternoon. My question is about the gaming industry. In the policy address, in the year 2022, you did not mention anything about the concession of the gaming license. It is a repetition of what you've mentioned before. So until now, nothing has been heard about the concession of the gaming license. So do we have a timetable? What are we going to expect? Maybe in the next policy address, you're going to tell us more about it. My next question is, in the COVID-19 epidemic, we have been affected tremendously, especially in the gaming industry. There are suggestions saying that we may focus a little bit more on online gaming. Do you think that during your term, you are going to do a research about the possibility of doing more gaming, online gaming, please? And in your policy address, you emphasize a lot on the development of hunting. But in Guangdong province, on the 27th of March, they actually implemented a new measure regarding the 14-day quarantine. Of course, I do understand that it is about the epidemic, but then it creates an impact to the integration of Shanghai and Macau. So how are you going to fortify our confidence regarding the integration of Macau into the Greater Bay Area? For your first question about the concession of the gaming license, I did not talk too much about it just now. That is true, because we need to do a little bit more research about it. Our previous term government had done research about it too, and based on their interim research, we are going to do more research about it. Without proper research properly done, we cannot just release news to the media immediately. So I think we need to follow the procedures closely, and this year, I don't think I am going to include it in my agenda this year. And for your second question about online gaming, I think in our interim report, we did think about it, but then we are still doing ongoing research about it too. And about hunting, on the 27th of March, I'm aware of the new measure regarding the 14-day quarantine. I don't think I'm going to lose confidence right away because we are doing similar measures to overseas residents as well. So I think during the epidemic or the outbreak of COVID-19, it is just normal, perfectly normal that we conduct or implement measures to protect the safety of our residents. It is our paramount thing to do as a government as we protect the Macau citizens. Thank you very much. And the lady in white. Good afternoon, Mr. Ho. The government has been saying a lot about giving priority to local residents for employment. But then at the same time, you are going to invite non-local residents to look for employment here. Do you think there is a dilemma here in these two measures? Do you think we should set a cap regarding the recruitment of overseas workers in Macau? And for affordable housing, do you have a timetable? My first question, you need to read my policy address very carefully and thoroughly. Do not just focus on one sentence. As we try to recruit more overseas or non-local residents, workers, it is necessary because we don't have sufficient manpower. So you do not just focus on one sentence by simply saying that we want to recruit more non-local residents. And for second question, I explained it already very clearly. There are altogether 3 zones. And secondly, we are doing research about it as well. Maybe there is a lot of information in the policy address. You need to read it carefully again. And the gentleman in the 3rd row. Good afternoon, Mr. Ho. I want to focus a little bit on the COVID-19 outbreak. Now, I think Macau is doing okay in terms of combating the virus. When are you going to announce more measures to recover our economy? Many of the industries are facing severe challenges. And you just mentioned that you are going to allow individual tourists from mainland. Maybe there would be more tourists from Guangdong province who could come to Macau. Do you have a timetable about that? And also about the reform of public administration. In the policy address, you mentioned that as you try to integrate news and also education and so on in the second and third quarter, what are you going to do? What kind of impact is going to create to the civil servants? For your first question, when are we going to receive individual tourists from mainland? I think we need to look at how we evaluate ourselves in terms of combating the virus. At different stages, we evaluate ourselves. And at this point, for 12 consecutive days, we do not have any more new confirmed cases, be it imported cases or local cases. And many of our cases are imported cases. Of course, I'm aware of that. So do you think that we have the condition to open up to tourism again? I think we still need some time. By the end of April, if we have 22 consecutive days having zero number of confirmed cases, then I think we are doing very okay. Especially in the second wave. Now we are facing challenges from the second wave of the outbreak because many of the infected cases are actually returnees from overseas. Still, we have 3 quarantine hotels in operation. Many of the returnees have gone home already. So under such circumstances, I think Macau is doing quite well. We are more stabilized, I guess. And Shanghai, it's also stabilized, I think, because we have strict measures and they have very strict measures as well. I hope in the near future we can start welcoming individual tourists and ordinary measures as before. But of course, like I said, our health is our paramount task. So I think we need to think of a code for us 2 places to share so that our chloric acid tests would be confirmed by 2 places as well. So for both places, these measures have to be recognized by both governments, and we need more time to discuss and evaluate. But at least we hope that in the very near future, we can start receiving tourists. Not too far distant future, I'm sure. Maybe we will be wearing masks, but we are doing better. I think we are going to get better and better. And for your second question, regarding the public administration reform, the timetable about the reform, I think in the report of the secretary, there will be more about it. So I am not going to reiterate it here. The gentleman in white from Macau Daily News. My question is, this is your first policy address. You mentioned that we are going to create a new future. This policy vision is kind of detached from previous policy addresses. Many of the old policies are not mentioned in this policy address, and there is this 5-year development plan, and it's not mentioned in your policy address as well. So what are you going to do about it? And as for welcoming tourists from mainland, have you talked to officials from Hong Kong and also Guangdong? How are we going to do with the health code? First of all, for the 5-year plan, the first one expires expires at the end of the year. We still have 8 more months to go. So as it expires, we are going to evaluate how we've been doing, and then we are going to do another 5-year plan. Of course, there are measures that must be different from previous government. I cannot just copy everything from previous governments without doing anything new. But I'm not doing the reform for the sake of changing things. What I want to do now is to see changes for the better as we go along in history. So I think as time goes by, we need to do things accordingly, and this is a more practical way to solve problems, because at different times we encounter different problems. And continuously, we've been talking to Guangdong and also Hong Kong. Before we get into a consensus, I cannot reveal anything to you as an individual or as the chief executive of Macau. Only when the 3 governments come into a consensus, we are going to release news to you immediately at the same time and at the same pace. Next, please. The lady in the 4th row. This one, please. Good afternoon. A while ago, you also mentioned that for 11 consecutive days, we do not have new confirmed cases. Do you think that I think we are actually quite stable in terms of the outbreak. For non-resident workers coming back to Macau, there is a 14-day guarantee. Do you think it should be lifted, or do you have a timetable for lifting such a measure? And under the outbreak, there are very strict measures, of course, and the communication between the Greater Bay Area regions and also Macau, there are blocks and also distance, spatial distance and intangible distance now that we see it. So what are we going to do to break the barriers? And also the protocol office and all the other subsidiary offices, Treasury Education Office and also the SEJ, all these departments and also offices. These are all new offices and bureaus generated and created by the previous government. Do you think that the structure of the government is wide and redundant? So that's why you are trying to combine different departments and offices together. And when you combine offices, what are you going to do with the staff and personnel? Thank you very much for your question. For your first question, for the 14-day guarantee for the quarantine for the non-local residents, we are not trying to create any bias or prejudice against them. This measure is only implemented because of the outbreak. There are a lot of non-local workers doing their 14-day quarantine in Zhuhai, and then they come back to Macau to work. There are a few hundreds of them every day. And when we see that they come from different regions, or sometimes Hubei, these workers are not only, they do not only come from Guangdong, they could come from anywhere in the entire country. Some of them could come from high-risk regions and provinces. We have no prejudice against them, let me repeat, but because they come back to Macau to work and they are they work within our society. So that's why I think it is very important that we place such tight measure to guarantee the safety and health of our citizens, because every day we count and make data analysis about how many people actually come to Macau, be they tourists or workers or anyone. We have no prejudice again, but you know that there are chances that these that people from these high-risk areas could return to their positive testing result. So therefore, I think it is very important that we need to place strict measure to protect the safety and health of Macau citizens. I hope that all of you would think from the bigger picture. Many of the workers came to Macau before the 18th or 19th of February, but then nothing much happened. As they left Macau, we have no measures about it. We're perfectly okay about it. But for them coming back or coming to Macau, we do have these measures, not because we have prejudice against them, but we only want to protect the safety and health of Macau citizens. For newcomers from these high-risk provinces or regions, we need to be very careful. Again, let me repeat, I have no prejudice against them. Everything we do is only for the benefit of the safety and health of the Macau citizens and the Macau society. Many of them, of course, I understand they cannot go back to Zhuhai temporarily, because we implemented our measure on the 20th of February, if you remember it right. These workers have been staying in Macau for 2 months without going home. It's the 20th of April again today. So it's been 2 months already, and I hope that there would be new measures for them to secure that these people could be working here in Macau, and then they could go home and visit their families very soon. I hope that new measures could be implemented soon, but at the same time, I also want to seek a balance, because if we cannot keep the number at 45, we would be facing severe risks of infection. So everything we do is for the benefit and sake of the health of Macau people and citizens. Anything happens could worsen the situation right now. And the second question about public administration offices. For details, I think the relevant secretary is going to explain to you in due course. I am not saying that any of the term of the government is doing better or worse. What I am saying is different secretaries, they may have new ideas to do reform and integration and simplification of our structure. So I think, personally speaking, I am not saying that I have an idea and it has to be done right away. I think we only do it because we want to do it for the benefit of the restructuring of the government. This is not the end of restructuring of the government. Maybe there is a second and a third step of integration and combination of different departments. Who knows? Okay, next, please. My question is about gaming industry. My question is, do you have a new round of concession? The current operators, do you think that they should need to apply for license again, or do you think that their license would be extended right away? Also, because of the outbreak, are you going to adjust the tax payment from the gaming operators? Thank you very much for your questions. Anyone is eligible to apply for the gaming concession. I remember at the very beginning, when we opened up the gaming industry, we set no rules about the application of the concession. Whether or not we are going to extend the license, of course, we are going to continue our work. We're not going to stop right there. And as for tax reduction, we have no plan yet. The gentleman in a black shirt. I have two questions. The first one is, as you mentioned in the policy address, you are trying to recover the economy and you are going to invest in infrastructure, for example, affordable housing and also light rail. Do you have a scale and scope of this investment? And also, as we try to do diversification of our economy, we haven't seen much results yet. What's the problem? What exactly is the problem? Why aren't we seeing any results? My second question is, after the outbreak of COVID-19, many of our residents generally lose confidence regarding the integration of Macau into the Greater Bay Area. They are not willing to live in mainland. But then in your policy address, you mentioned again that we need to integrate into the Greater Bay Area. What is your view on that? How are you going to rebuild confidence in the citizens? First of all, for public investment, such as light rail and also the affordable housing. At this point, I do not have a solid number. We have invested a huge amount into it. We have invested about 10 billion into it already. So in this recent years, we have invested not less than 10 billion plus into this project. And also for your second question, for economic diversification, we have been doing it for so many years because we don't have too much space for economic diversification, unfortunately. But like I said in the policy address, Macau's economy is quite small. So if we only focus on our market, which only gives us a population of about 600,000 people, it is very difficult to hang on to the idea of economic diversification. Before we used to export, before the gaming license was opened up. But now, with our current GDP, it is very difficult for us to have factories and do export. So I think it is a better idea for us to grasp the idea and integrate into the Greater Bay Area and diversify our economy. I am quite sure that our confidence could be rebuilt. If it is just because of these it is just because of the outbreak, it is just because of this 14-day quarantine, and suddenly you lose confidence. How about these students who return from overseas countries? Are they going to lose their confidence? They are never going back to Europe to continue their study. I don't think it is going to happen. At some point, things would go back to normal and our confidence would go back to normal. This is a temporary problem. The outbreak is only a temporary problem. After the outbreak is over, I'm quite sure our confidence would come back. And the gentleman over there. Good afternoon. I have a few questions for you. The first one is for the middle-class people in Macau. How do you define this middle-class people? After you define it, what kind of measures would you specifically design for these middle-class people? My second question is for visas. For visas to tourists who come to Macau, those mainlanders who would like to visit Macau, when are you going to restart this visa issuing procedures? Considering the fact that the economy of Macau, it's not going to build up so soon, maybe we should think about strengthening our own economy. Do you think it is the case? Well, for middle-class people, I think we are going to ask the society to decide who are the middle-class people. The government is not going to define who specifically are the middle-class people. We need to think about what the general consensus we obtain from the Macau citizens in general. We always think about how we should move up the social ladder, especially in terms of the housing segment. So I think for people who are in the middle class, they may need to think about where they position themselves, and also there is a ladder for different classes to live in different housing segments. So I think all our policies and also measures are designed for different segments and different social classes. It is very important that we define and design these different social classes so that we design appropriate measures for them. An overall policy would not do anyone any good. And for the second question, for visas for individual tourists, we have been getting in touch with the central government, and until this point, we have positive feedbacks from mainland. And if we can do well combating the outbreak, I am quite sure that we can resume individual tourists very soon. So what I hope is we try not to increase any more confirmed cases so that we can boost our economy again. So long as we don't need to stop anything again, we are fine. What about the lady over there? Good afternoon. First of all, for public administration reform, when you try to transfer the tourism bureau into the secretary of economy and finance, what kind of a concept is that? And in the future, any more integration do you expect? And my second question is, you mentioned just now the money spent on combating the virus. Are you going to increase the number? First of all, for the reform of public administration, why are we putting Tourism Bureau under the Secretary of Economy and Finance? We have conducted a lot of executive meetings in order to come to that conclusion. We know that tourism is one of the pillar industries of Macau. Where are we going to position tourism? Should we put it under social affairs and culture? All these years, it is under the social affairs and culture. But you know that the Secretary for Social Affairs and Culture, she has no responsibility in boosting the economy. So I think as one of the pillar industries of Macau, which constitutes a very important part of our economy, it should be placed under the Secretary of Economy because all the different departments are going to work together to boost tourism. For example, the convention and tourism industry and all the other related industries under tourism would be boosted under the same secretary. So I think that by integrating these different government departments together, it is not going to create a negative impact to anyone. I'm not trying to criticize the Secretary for Social Affairs and Culture and to punish her by putting the Tourism Bureau under the supervision of a different secretary. It's not that. My consideration is only from the perspective of feasibility and collaboration between different government departments. And for the money spent on combating the virus, we have spent about 12% of our GDP to combat the virus. We have spent a lot of money on them. It is a great part to our GDP. And for the rest of the money, we still have a sum reserved to boost our economy. So as you go to the policy address, read very carefully the breakdown of the sums, and you can see how we spent the public funds. How are we going to spend this money? If we are ever going to receive tourists from mainland again, we are going to try to make them spend a night here in Macau. We try to attract more tourists to come to Macau, and so that we are going to create more business for the local tourism industry. I think the local Macau people should also support the tourism industry as well. We can try and encourage local people to do local tourism here in Macau. And this is how we spend the money. Make sure you go back to the breakdown and see what's happening there. Good afternoon. I would like to know a little bit more about the non-local workers. There are also overseas workers. They cannot come back to Macau and do the 14-day quarantine. What measures do you think the government could do to help them. Because for the mainland workers, we have a 14-day quarantine measure for them. But what about overseas workers? As for the gaming industry and the concession of the gaming license, have you had meetings with the operators? Because you know that in the past few months, we had stopped the operation for 14 days. How are we going to boost their business again? For overseas workers, such as Filipinos, Indonesians, and so on, they are mainly domestic workers and many other workers as well, of course. We have no direct flights, unfortunately, and there is no chance for them to come back to Macau at the moment. This is a tight measure. Of course, we can lift this measure as soon as possible, but it has to be done only if we can look at the health and safety conditions here in Macau. If we do not try to send them away, and they can always go home if possible. If they find possible means of transportation, they can go home. But when they expire, if their visa expires, we do not allow them to go home. That is unfair. But at the moment, we do. This is the only thing we can do to protect the safety of our Macau citizens. And soon, we hope that there would be more direct flights with these countries or maybe these cities, so that when they fly back to Macau, there is something that we can do. So think about it. Now that Hong Kong is implementing measures as well. So if there is no direct flight to fly back to Macau, they have to transit in Hong Kong. And if now Hong Kong does not allow them to enter Hong Kong, what can we do? This is a global epidemic. I hope that we should try focus on the health of our local citizens. Look at what's happening in Europe. Before, there is no barrier between European countries, and now they are doing pretty much the same thing as we do. It is very difficult to question different countries, and especially their measures to protect their local citizens. So I hope that we should try to take a more understanding attitude. In the past few months, I haven't been doing a lot of meetings with them since January. Until now, there are only 3 months. And I am quite sure the gaming operators, they still have the reserves to support themselves. Good afternoon. My question is about your policy address. After you reading it, you spent a lot of time talking about Hangting. And a lot of people would guess that maybe Hangting is going to be the second Macau. What's your view on that? And also about the benefits and measures for social measures for local citizens. Now that we are facing an outbreak, of course, we understand it. But when the economy picks up, do you think we are going to relax these measures? We're not going to give out as much benefits to the local people. And now, before you became the chief executive, you said that the government is a hot kitchen. What's your view about this now? How much time do you think that you are going to lead Macau people to get out of these challenging and difficult times? Whether or not Hangting is going to be the second Macau, of course, it is in my vision and it is my hope. The University of Macau is a very good example. I hope that one day Hangting is going to implement similar measures and also policies as Macau, so that, like you said, it is going to be like the second Macau. This is why I spent a lot of time talking about Hangting. And think about it, if we are going to reclaim land and then develop this reclaimed land, it is going to take a lot of time. So I think if we are going to create a diversified economy, I think the development of Hangting is going to be a very important step. Hangting, of course, has its weakness as well. We cannot really ask Hangting to do manufacturing industry like before, but instead we are going to hope that Hangting is going to do more modernized industry and also manufacturing industry. And during this particular period, there are a lot of benefits and measures under these challenging times during the outbreak. But this kind of benefits cannot last forever. I do not see that there is the need for us to distribute e-vouchers and e-consumption cards every year and every month. So I think that during this difficult time, of course, we need to do something about it. Macau is not the only city that distributes or that hand out e-consumption cards or e-vouchers. Many of the mainland governments, they're doing pretty much the same thing as well. The concepts are pretty much the same, but then the way they do it could be slightly different. But above all, the objective is shared and common. We only hope to improve the economy, and I have confidence. That with all of our hard work, we are going to do better. Out of all the politicians, globally speaking, no one can say that they can lead their country or they can lead their region and get back to normal in a certain period of time. We don't have a timetable because we're talking about a virus outbreak. But at the moment, I hope that at least on the 4th of May, we can resume classes. That is a very big step. It is a big step ahead of everybody else. Except in mainland, a lot of the schools globally are still closed. So I think if we can start senior secondary schools on the 4th of May and junior secondary schools on the 11th of May, we are doing a very good job already. I know there are online classes, but online classes are not meant to be forever because we are not going to create the right learning environment for the Macau students. I cannot promise anything. I cannot say that after 1 year we would be perfectly okay, we would go back to normal. I cannot make such promises. But I can guarantee you that we are going to pick up gradually and slowly. And we hope that we can get back to our days like before. Maybe we are going to implement new measures later on, but who knows? Good afternoon. My question is about the Tourism Bureau again. By placing it under the Secretary of Economy and Finance, the pillar industry is of course the gaming industry, and of course the government is trying to promote other industries as well. For example, the creative industry. Now that you try to include tourism industry under the Secretary of Secretary of Economy and Finance, apart from what you mentioned, apart from the reasons you mentioned, do you think that by doing that, it is going to lessen the creative industry component in the tourism industry? And also, when you try to recruit more non-local workers, my question is, do you have a different focus now? Do you want to recruit high-end professionals? And do you think it is going to affect local Macau citizens who want to move up the social ladder of the career? And also about training programs, I'm not quite sure. They want to know a little bit more about the 6,000 package, whether or not it is going to be continued for the training program. Well, for what's happening about integration, exactly why we are trying to include the Tourism Bureau under the Secretary of Economy and Finance, apart from the reasons I mentioned just now, especially in terms of economy, there is MICE and there is convention. IPIM is also under the Secretary of Economy and Finance. So you see, we are going to include technology under economy and finance as well. Economy is not just about tourism. Your concept is not quite right, because economy is not just about the gaming industry. All economic activities should go under the Secretary of Economy and Finance. We need to clarify that point. And also for non-local workers, is it going to create a negative impact to the local talents who want to move up the social ladder in Korea? Well, I think we need to look further, because we need a lot of IT talents, which the local Macau citizens may not have at the moment. And you also need to revise the audit report. We have been doing a lot of training programs. And according to the report prepared by the audit office, you know that there are a lot of problems with the 6,000 Pataga training scheme. Only if they can rectify the problems mentioned in the audit report. We have spent about 1.7 billion Pataga in this particular training scheme already. But what have we done? The audit report has written very clearly what the problems are. So as we evaluate the problems, and we are not trying to solve these problems, so these problems still exist. So what I would like to say is, only if we can rectify these problems, we can spend our money wisely, we would restart the training, the paid training program. I'm not saying that we're going to stop, but only if you rectify it, we're going to restart it. And the reporter at the back. Good afternoon. You mentioned just now that during the outbreak, we have spent 50 billion Patacash. With this expenditure, it's going to create a deficit to our finance. What other measures do you think you are going to do that are negatively affected by such deficit? Are you going to cut our budget, or are you going to cut, what kind of budget are you going to cut exactly? Thank you very much for your question. Yes, it is true that we spent 50 billion. But we have a lot of resources in our reserves. We have about 600 billion. So for the government expenditure, of course, we need to minimize our expenditure. That is true, of course. How are we going to stimulate the economy? I mentioned it in the policy address already. I am not going to do less, because I want to boost the economy. But for money that should not be spent, we should try to cut it. We should be very, very careful with our administrative expenditure. For the Macau Grand Prix and all the other big activities and events, we need to have bigger budgets to improve our economy. My question is, last year, you said that only in Macau, in the entire China, there is no such thing as the union law. But in the policy address, you did not mention anything about the union law. Is it because you agree with the report issued by the government previously that we should not create such a law? And I would like to ask about the Tourism Bureau again. For it going back to, being transferred to the Secretary of Economy and Finance, we heard about it before. But do you think that such move is going to boost the economy? That is true, but it is going to create a negative impact to the creative industry in Macau, because this kind of tourism industry is not going to, this transfer under the Secretary of Economy and Finance, it is not going to place any emphasis on culture and also creativity. So it is not going to diversify our economy. That's my view. And also, for the audit report, of course, there were problems mentioned in the audit report, in many of the audit reports, but then a lot of the government departments, they listen to the comments and suggestions, but they never do anything to rectify their problems. So what exactly do you think you're going to do to make sure that government departments are going to rectify the problems? Well, I did not include the union law, but the Secretary of Economy and Finance is going to has told you already. During the campaign, I told you that I wanted to set up the union law, but then the Secretary of Economy and Finance had also explained to you exactly what kind of conditions are we facing right now. So we need to respect the Secretary as well. The government is working on the drafting of such law, and we will see what is going to happen soon. Tourism and culture. What kind of cultural tourism do we see? Look at St. Paul's ruins. There is no one there, basically, and we are worried. And you're asking me all this time, when are we going to end these challenging times, especially for the tourism industry? So as you see, there are different perspectives and there are different angles to look at the problem. We cannot try to have too much or too less of everything. It is very difficult to control everything, but we should try to seek a balance as we are facing this challenge from the coronavirus and also from the lack of tourists. Before, when we were having when people claim that we are having too many tourists, we try to think about tourist texts, but then at this point, do we still think about the same thing? Of course not. So I think here, as time goes by, we face different challenges and we have different solutions to different problems. Previous government has done a great job to protect cultural heritage and all these tourist sites, but there are cultural heritage that are getting old, and we need to repaint them, and we need to reconstruct them, and there is a lot of work for us to do so that we protect these cultural heritage sites. These are very important works that we need to do. Now we don't have too many tourists. I think it is a good time to do it. And secondly, because many of the workers are facing unemployment issues. So I think it is also a good time to ask our workers to help us preserve this cultural heritage and do some painting maybe and fix them maybe. Any fixtures need to be done. We can do it right now because now we do not have too many tourists. We're not crowded with tourists. So I think it is a good time for us to reposition ourselves, to fix ourselves, and then to start again later when things are okay. And for audit reports, since I took office, I received 2 audit reports. One is about the airport, and the second one it's about the continuing education and paid training scheme, and one it's about the foundation, Macau Foundation. I established an office, GPSAP, which is Public Fund Supervision Office, to look at how public funds are spent wisely in Macau. So I would like to reassure the work by the audit department, and also on the 31st of March, there was an also report about the airport, and I think they are going to look into the mismanagement of the airport, and they are going to review it and rectify the problems. And just now, a reporter also mentioned about the continuing education scheme. I said it very clearly. If you cannot rectify the long-standing problems, we are not going to continue. If the audit department mentions so many problems, and if we continue to carry out things as they are, then this is a disrespect to the audit department, because we do no matter what the audit department says anyway. Right, so I think it is very important the education institutes and also organizations, they need to think very carefully. They need to think very carefully what they need to do in order to restart the 6,000 Pataka paid training scheme. Only if these education institutions are to a certain standard, they could receive this kind of training. This is a sign of respect, a gesture of respect to the audit department. This is very, very important. So until now, I would like to emphasize once again, I have received these audit reports since I took office, and I am going to take the same attitude for these audit reports. We need to take them seriously and with respect. Good afternoon. During your campaign, you mentioned that there is a public administration reform and there is the reform about universal suffrage as well. Do you have a timetable for universal suffrage? I think we need to look at the picture in a bigger context. I never said anything. I never said no about universal suffrage, but I never promised a timeline or timetable. Only if we have basis that we can start talking about it. Good afternoon. During the outbreak, many people talked about the prices of pork and also oil. These two important commodities are very expensive. What special measures are you going to supervise the prices of pork and also oil? Guess. For a lot of youngsters, in big enterprises, many of the managerial level positions are recruited, are overseas employees. So this creates a negative impact to the climbing up the social ladder for Macau young people. So that's why they try to seek opportunities elsewhere. What are you going to do for these youngsters? And also for the civil servants, now we have about 38,000 civil servants. And now that you are going to integrate a few of the government departments, are you going to lay off some of these civil servants? Pork is very expensive. Many Macau people have reflected that point to me. And even if it's so expensive, we cannot get any. We only have about 100 small pigs to Macau. It is very expensive, I agree. For the government, we can see that problem. But we need to wait for us until to negotiate. And Nam your company has subsidized a lot of the importation of pork. And you know, for Hong Kong, they are paying 4,000 per ton, but for Macau we are paying about 3,000 per ton, which is not as expensive as Hong Kong. But of course, still it is a problem. I agree. In Doumen, in May, if they can do something for us to transit, if they can give us some of the pigs directly from other regions in China, it would create a positive impact to our pork prices. At the moment, the prices that the company is giving us actually are making losses. We cannot keep asking these private companies to pay for our Macau citizens, but there is nothing we can do. Still, for this money, supervised and subsidized, we still are facing problem trying to get pork and pig from mainland. If Hong Kong is paying more to get this pork and also pigs, then maybe we cannot get anything. This is a very serious problem. There are many pig importers in Hong Kong. They are thinking about importing pork from Korea. I'm not quite sure if they can do it, but they are thinking about it. They're planning it because there is not much hope in mainland China because the auction is getting more and more expensive. As for gas prices, oil prices, we've been negotiating as well. The prices from Nam Quang has gone down a little bit, but the other companies are not going down at all. For an open economy and a free economy, there is always room for them to decide their own prices. It is very difficult for us as the government to force them or to make them lower the price. I think Nam Quang has go down the price by 0.8, by 80%, by 80 cents. I do agree that there is a problem, but this is what we get for a free economy. Now we fix the pork price at 3,090. We can 3,090 petacash per ton. We can only get a certain number of pigs and not very good quality pigs because this is what we are paying and this is what we can get. The problem with these pigs are they are not very big. If these porks are big like what we got before, then there won't be any problem. But look at the pigs we get now. They are very small pigs and their bodies are very small. And that would not provide us with the sufficient amount of pork that all Macau citizens would need. So I think the municipal department, the municipal affairs department, they are going to try their best to help us. As for going up the employment ladder, then maybe there are other opportunities in the banking industry, maybe only in the gaming industry and also in the hotel industry. Maybe they do have a certain number or percentage of overseas workers in those industries, but they are trying to minimize or lower that particular percentage. I don't have the right number here yet, but you can look it up online. I mentioned already for civil servants, we have currently 38,000 civil servants, but I think this is the cap right now. I would like to see more horizontal exchanges and interactions. I am not going to lay anyone off. For some of the government departments, they are working their heads off, and I think they should try to fix the problem horizontally speaking. I would like to look at the legal matters first. At the moment, it is very difficult to transfer a person horizontally. Whatever we do, we need to do everything in a legal manner. So I think it is very important that we establish new rules before we break the old rules. Good afternoon. My question is, for the concession of the gaming license, at the moment, you are still under investigation and research. How much time you are going to spend on this research? Do you have a timetable for this research and evaluation? Second question is also about the gaming industry. What exactly is an acceptable GDP to you? As for talents and personnel, you also mentioned that you are going to recruit more talents and professionals elsewhere. Private sectors, do you think you are going to have any restrictions and bars for recruiting overseas talents? Well, for the gaming industry research, we have done a second round evaluation. It is not just a research. They did an interim evaluation report, and based on this report, we are doing a second round of consultation. Before we set up or establish any new regulations, we need to do consultation. These are the procedures. I think in the second half of the year, we are trying to do the consultation. Because of the outbreak, we are delayed for a few months. Second question, I don't quite understand it. I don't really know what an acceptable GDP is. GDP is about our capacity. There is no standardized GDP for any region or country. I think it is a true reflection of how we've been doing in terms of our population and also our economy. So I have no answer to your question. What exactly is a standardized GDP for Macau? I do not have an answer for your question. Maybe I do have an expectation. During these challenging times, I do not get as much tax as before. The tax money is 130 billion less than before, and it's a huge amount. So I think these numbers all reflect our GDP. Because GDP reflects a huge amount of the gaming revenues. As for talents and personnel, of course, private sectors. We are talking about talents and recruiting talents and personnel elsewhere or overseas. Yeah, but for civil servants, we cannot do that. Definitely. And good afternoon. When I look at the policy address, are you going to strengthen national security education and regional security education? Why is that the case? Do you think that we are facing security problems? That's why you want to enhance that kind of education? Well, only if we have a country, we have our home. Maybe you feel differently. China is our home. Only if we have China, we have the Macau Special Administrative Region. If you go back to Portugal, you have the same feeling. You want your country to be safe. You want your country to be strong so that you can establish your home there. I don't think there are hidden issues here. That's why we need to enhance security education. This is not something that we need to look at right now. This is a long-term issue. We need to do it continuously. If we discard our country, what's the point of having the special administrative region? Where do we position ourselves? So I hope we all understand this point. Good afternoon. I have a few questions. For the policy address, you mentioned smart city, the construction of a smart city. There were many ideas and comments about a digital payment. We are doing very slowly on a digital payment. Do you think the government can do something about e-payment? Especially the government can create a standardized platform for everyone, and also for non-local workers. Under the Secretary of Economy and Finance, it is mentioned that the construction industry and also the gaming industry, they are going to tighten they are going to do something about they're going to readjust the number of non-local workers. Well, first of all, for digital payment, I think it is a very important concept. Why are we issuing 3,000 and another 5,000 patakas worth of cash, worth of e-consumption cards? Because we've been trying to do e-payment. Some of the companies are doing quite all right about it, but then there are SMEs who are worried about e-payment. They are not comfortable about it. we always have experience about spending cash, and also giving you the cash part taking scheme before. Why do I give you 3,000 worth of e-voucher instead of giving you 3,000 cash? I think that one thing to do about it is the digital commerce and also e-payment. There are a lot of vendors who are now willing to install the e-payment unit. They install the unit because now everyone has a card, has an e-consumption card. Only if we can popularize the concept of e-payment with the card, you can ask the city in general to make full use, or to develop e-payment in full use. Only if you are comfortable about using e-payment, then we can develop e-payment further. Of course, this is only a first step, but this is going to be a very effective step because everyone is going to have a card. And with this card, you are going to start learning how to do e-payment. Children have one, adults have one, elderly have one. And the second question, for non-local workers, the gaming industry and also the construction industry, this year, we are facing serious employment problems in these two particular industries. So in the next few days, when the Secretary of Economy and Finance is going to present himself at the Legislative Assembly, he's going to explain to you further. My question, it's about when are we going to lift these quarantine measures. We hope that there are news saying that on the 1st of May, we may be reconnected with Shanghai and also Hong Kong. Is there a hope? Is there a high chance of doing that on the 1st of May? And also for the gaming industry, many of the reporters have asked similar questions, but you are not saying too much about it. But after the outbreak, when we think about the concession of the gaming license, what new measures are you going to what are you going to include in the contract? Maybe you are going to include the concept of social responsibility in the contract, in the concession contract. As for receiving tourists, again, today is the 20th of April. We still have 10 days to see what we are facing right now. Before we had 40-day zero confirmed case, and suddenly we have all these new cases. So anything could happen in 10 days. All these numbers were just going up suddenly after this 40-day zero confirmed case. So I think at this point, I do not want to make any promise. I do not want to announce anything by myself. But what I want to tell you is that it is the outbreak, it is what's happening during the outbreak that decide for us. We do not decide for ourselves. There are a lot of people who were infected, and because they have a Macau ID, they do not really live in Macau, but still they come back to Macau for to receive medical support. So these are not things that we could calculate, and these are not things that we could plan. So what I tell you is, what I can tell you is, the mainland is doing very well, especially with the chloric acid tests. And also for overseas countries like the US or maybe UK, we have negotiated with Hong Kong already. Until the 31st of March, we receive our last batch of Macau residents. And I told you explicitly, 31st of March is the deadline for receiving Macau residents from overseas countries, because overseas countries are not going to allow you to get on board because of measures from other countries or regions, for example, Hong Kong. So there are a lot of airlines who would decline the boarding of Macau citizens because they expect that you cannot get back to Macau even if you get boarded. So the only thing we can do is to set 31st of March as the deadline. This is the last day where we receive Macau residents from Hong Kong. Hong Kong is also an administrative region. They have the right to make decisions. If we have the same measure implemented here and we keep granting exemption to Hong Kong, what's the purpose of this measure? Right? So I hope that at this point we only have gratitude to Hong Kong because they've helped us a lot. And if people can do cloac acid tests, you can get on board. These are a lot of common measures for a lot of countries and regions. We need to protect the safety of the crew members as well. So after taking the cloac acid tests, if you pass it, you can get on board and you can still stay in the quarantine facility for 14 days. This is very important. These are very important measures that we all need to follow. So without the cloac acid test, it is going to be totally different. So I hope that we all understand there should be trust to be built up in between people in Macau. Try not to have too many gatherings. Try wash your hands so that we can remain confirmed case free for a longer period of time. Then we can ask from the central government to receive tourists again. For the gaming industry concession license, the interim report is online and you have access to it as well. This is a detailed report. What kind of responsibilities should they bear? What other responsibilities should they bear as well? I also read the same report and ponder on the work that I can do. Are we going to add more responsibilities to the gaming industries? Well, I think during the consultation period, we can all give the gaming industry suggestions and comments. Maybe in the purchasing and procurement procedures and also in the training procedures, they can do something about it. They can do more responsibility, pay more responsibilities about it. And also for the non-gaming element, what can they do to help out the Macau citizens and also society? These are all issues generated from the gaming industry. So during the consultation period, it is a free period of time where the society can offer and ask for suggestions. So this is a draft only, and after the discussion at the Legislative Assembly, we are going to pass it. But of course, we are going to collect information and suggestions from the society and then reflect these suggestions in the Legislative Assembly. These are the procedures that we need to follow. And anything we do, we need legislative basis. Only if we have legislative basis, we can conduct anything further. Good afternoon. I would like to confirm with you again the new gaming license concession. Are you going to have an open consultation? Of course, definitely. Any legislation we need to establish, there is always a consultation period. Good afternoon. I would like to know a little bit more about non-local workers. Are you going to give them any subsidies? And also for young people, are you going to help them to purchase a flat or a property? Are you going to set up new rules or legislation to help these youngsters? The overseas workers, non-local workers subsidies. What kind of subsidies are you talking about, please? For local residents and enterprises, you have different kinds of subsidies during this outbreak. But for non-local residents or workers, what kind of financial subsidies are you offering these non-local workers? It is not that we do not want to think about them, but if we actually give non-local residents or non-local workers financial subsidies, it is going to create a lot of noise, because these non-local workers, they work here in Macau, and they under the pretext of equality and fair, they receive fair treatment and equal treatment as local Macau residents. And also, these workers, they have a 500 pataka housing subsidy every month already. Of course, 500 pataka cannot give them, is not enough to rent a flat. But then it is a subsidy that a lot of local residents do not have. So if we are going to give financial subsidies to all these non-local workers, the total number of these workers go up to 19,000, which is similar to the number of local resident workers. So here, if we are going to give them financial subsidies, it is going to create a lot of noise, I'm sure. As for youngsters, there are middle-class people who are packed in between. I think youngsters should be the middle-class people as well. So we are going to see what we are going to do to help them trying to buy a flat. My question, in the policy address, you are going to secure employment, which is going to be an emphasis of your policy address. But what exactly are you going to secure employment, especially local residents? Some may say that because of the construction projects, you are going to secure employment, but these are manual labor and workers. Exactly what measures are you going to have to secure employment for the local residents? And where does this idea come from? Based on what grounds do you decide to secure employment of local residents? And also, when you try to support economy, you encourage more investment. This is not a point emphasized before, but why do you want to emphasize this point before, especially for investment? It is also listed here in the focus point of your in the focus point of your policy address. You want to introduce more investment here, and you want to station this investment here, which are going to benefit the economic diversification of Macau. So do you think you are going to gravitate too much to these investments? And especially to the land resources. If you focus a lot on the development of land resources, we don't have a lot of resources as far as I know. So are you going to segregate a little bit of this land resources for this kind of investment introduced to Macau? And I would like to ask one more question. In your policy address, you do not have a number for the total expenditure for the entire policy address, the total number, the total final number to be spent. For secure employment, this is very clear. Under the pretext of the outbreak, this is something that we need to do. There is nothing to talk about it because it is very difficult to say how many people a company should hire. No one would write like this in a policy address, I am quite sure. No policy address would include fine print like that. And Secretary of Economy and Finance, Mr. Lei, is going to answer a lot of questions about what he's going to do to secure employment. So I'm not going to reiterate here. As for supporting the economy, the previous government had done a great job. I see a lot of work continuously done to support the economy. Are we going to gravitate our support for this investment? I hope you look into the land law. If you are not going to if you're not going to build a school or maybe a church or any religious institutes, we are not going to gravitate the land resources to you, definitely. So land resources are very important to Macau people and the Macau society. So we're not going to gravitate that to any investments, financial investments. We have our guidelines there. Please read the law. And there are different departments that are creating problems regarding the paid training scheme. Do you think any of the government officials would be held responsible because of their failure or because of their mistakes? Now we cannot continue with the 6,000 Pataka training scheme. Well, the official has left already, I think. I think the official quit already. This person is no longer a civil servant. I think it is not just about a person. It is about I am not going to hold this person responsible, but I would like to see what exactly is the problem, and I would like to know why everyone sees there are problems in the paid training scheme, but nobody is going to fix the problem. The 6,000 Pataka is a lot of money for everyone. There are people who use this 6,000 Pataka to learn how to drive or to do any some of the training courses. Of course, it is okay. But there are people who spend this money in an illegal way. So the money is spent, but not properly spent. So I think this is the core of the problem. If we do not rectify the core of the problem and we continue doing the 6,000 Pataka paid training scheme, for twice, the audit report mentions all these problems with the paid training scheme. There must be problems there. So I think it is very important that we spend the money wisely. All these years, we spent 17.8 billion Pataka in this training program. But what have we done? Do you think we are doing well with the money? Do you think the money is wisely spent? So I hope that the money is going to go to the people of Macau, wisely spent, and they are going to learn something. Good afternoon. I have two questions. The first question is about environmental protection. In the policy address, you mentioned a little bit about greening, about a green environment for our next generation. What I'd like to know is, when you boost the economy, what are you going to do as you boost the economy? How are you going to seek a balance between the development of economy and also the preservation of greening areas in Macau? There are the gaming industries. They create a lot of wastes, for instance. So where is the balance? Number two, for the protection of animals. When you were the president of the Legislative Assembly, you passed a law to protect animals. Many of our readers want me to ask the same question. When you pass the protection of animal law, there is no case. Nothing happened. But then actually we see a lot of things are happening. We see a lot of people trying to abuse animals. We try to use CCTV or the surveillance cameras to look for criminals. But then what about making good use of the surveillance cameras to catch these criminals who abuse animals? Because you always talk about cross-department collaboration. Do you think that these different departments could collaboratively work together to protect these animals? I am quite sure that people are all happy here in Macau. There are a lot of benefits for Macau people, but what about the animals? For environmental protection, there are a lot of casinos and the gaming industry, a lot of air conditioners. Of course, it's going to create a negative impact to our environment and the air. But then the Environmental Protection Bureau, they have been keeping a close eye on the air quality and also the environmental issues of Macau. If anything is wrong, if the air quality is wrong, then they are going to do something about it. So when we do more about the environmental protection, we are going to make it greener for Macau. We need to plant more trees, of course. We need to make the area greener, definitely. So here, based on what we've been doing, we are trying to do more. And in the area where we have water wastes, we are going to do something about these water wastes so that they could be so that the water could be purified before they are discharged. So a lot of the greening and also environmental protection measures are going to be implemented, and I want to create more leisure space for the Macau people. As for the protection of animals, now that we don't have any cases, that is true. It is very difficult to ask a surveillance camera to follow a cat or a dog every day. I know it is very important that we protect animals. If you see anything that is wrong, if you see anyone that is hurting an animal or abusing an animal, if you see it happening, try to record it with your phone and try to send us the footage so that we can do something about it. There are so many animals, and it is very difficult for us to keep an eye on each and every animal. And you know, human beings and animals are totally different. If a person has broken the law, of course, we use the surveillance camera. But if these people are not breaking any laws, we cannot use our surveillance camera. If the cats and dogs are just walking about in the city, we cannot just keep following these animals. So only if we see somebody trying to abuse an animal, we try to make good use of the surveillance camera. So if you see anything or anyone is hurting an animal, please do let us know. Last question, please. My follow-up question. You said before that the concession of the gaming license, before there were 3 licenses, and then there were 3 additional sub-licenses. What are we going to do with the 6th number? With the total number of 6 gaming licenses? Well, now that we have 3 plus 3, and under the law, I'm not quite sure which number is it, but there is a clause which allows 3 plus 3. So in the revision of the new law, we are going to revise this issue. We cannot have 3 plus 3 plus 3 plus 3 And it goes on and on and on forever. So we are going to have a number. We're going to revise it, and we are going to revise the law according to the consultation and the comments and suggestions obtained from the public. So I'm not going to say yes or no right here. Only if we have done the consultation with the general public, we try to revise the legislation. And this legislation is implemented and drafted based on the consensus of the Macau people. So anything that if we see anything wrong, we try to revise it. Any more questions? I never mentioned the number 6. Please do not. I'm saying that 3 plus 3 is what's happening. This is the reality. But I'm not saying that 6 is the final number or 6 is not the final number. I am trying to say that we try to make it in the law, include a number in the law, so that we try to do things properly. And we do everything in accordance with the rules and regulations. I did not say anything about 3 or 6 or what. Now we have 6 because we have 3 plus 3, which is the reality. I do not have a definite number. Let me repeat, because if I say 6 or a definite number, and then you've always followed that number and you keep repeating that number, which is not true. So maybe there is 1. Right? So I'm just kidding. But after the consultation period, we see what the people are going to say about our gaming industry. So for the benefits of the entire Macau, I hope everyone is going to give us comments and suggestions. You have come to the government 3 times already today. So thank you very much. Thank you very much.